So welcome to this webinar. Great to have you all here. While we are still setting up, I would appreciate if you could post your name, location, and job title in the chat. Feel free to add the name of the company as well if you are so inclined. Of course, you don't have to. Just a courtesy for others in the meeting, just so that we know who is there and where we are all from. Now, most of you will know me. We are connected with, I'm connected, I believe, with almost everybody in this call on LinkedIn. So just, let's say, giving people a little bit more time to come into this call. Well, while you are doing all of this, we will be talking about product strategy today, but not only strategy, but also execution. How, if done smartly, you can significantly improve the outcome of your work while at the same time streamlining your work, which is what I'm trying to help you with this webinar. But before we jump into this, please put any questions that you might have in the chat. I'll try to answer them throughout the presentation as much as I can. If I'm not able to do so, of course, I hope we have enough time at the end of this to go through a short Q&A session. Pique your interest a little bit. There's going to be a surprise for you at the end of the session, a gift for all of you who hold out that long. I hope, which in the end is going to be almost all of you. So thanks for sharing your names. Thanks for sharing your details. I think we have quite an interesting group of people here at the moment. So without further ado, I'm going to be sharing my screen. I'm going to be jumping into the session now. Right, there we go. So let me jump into the session by telling you a story about one of my biggest failures. The one thing that I could personally think of, one of the largest projects where I failed. And it started with something like this. Michael pulled a plug. Sorry, actually, this is the wrong picture. This is the right one. Michael pulled the plug, of course. There was no plug in any form, disturbed, hurt, or something when I created that presentation, of course. And yes, it really started, or it really starts with, Michael, we need to pull the plug on a really large project. Of course, not something you want to do to your client of that point of time of more than 2.5 years, where jointly with a team of experts, we had finished a previous project for Michael. And we were hired as the internal resources, were not able to deliver. We delivered the first project in record time, on time, and successfully. We were so successful that Michael asked us if we were willing to take a stab at this project. So what we were trying to do here in the end was replace an existing project manager at that point who just decided to leave the organization. So is anybody in yet? Still? There we go. There's another one. Sorry about that. Still somebody coming into the meeting. So the previous project manager at that point actually had just left the project. That was the third on the project within 3 years. He really just quit. And Michael asked us if we were interested in managing this project. How would you respond just after having finished the project for this client? Michael reached out to us and asked us if we were willing to run this. And yeah, it's I was fully expecting this to be a big challenge. Also because he really also told us that in the end, the likelihood of this project failing is something that he expected to be very high. So I'm not somebody that is shying away from challenges. I told Michael that I would be willing to give it a try. And of course, I also had that discussion before with the remaining teams that I had delivered the first project with, if they were willing to join. And based off the high likelihood of failure, would you consider a project where you know that you will likely fail a major failure? I personally believe so, but not for that reason, for a different reason. And the reason is actually something completely different. So, of course, when we started this project, we had several workshops, like always. So many different workshops that we run. We really try to understand what the issues were. We really try to understand, of course, also what the topics were that the technical team wanted to deliver. But what happened when we engaged with the technical team? We saw backstabbing. Things like they have no clue what they are talking about. What are they even doing here? Why are we having all of these workshops? We are discussing the same things over and over again. Does this sound in any form familiar to you with other projects that you might have run? There was a lot of smoke and mirrors. Once the team realized that they could not get rid of us, they tried to drown us in information, push us in the wrong direction, deflect us towards fringe topics in the end. Yes, they were posturing on both sides. I can play this game as well as the next man. Yes, Michael initially was afraid of the two silverbacks, his words, clashing. But we never clashed. There never was a reason for us to. It took several weeks in which we were able to establish a working relationship, weeks in which we were able to build trust. We spent many days in workshops. We spent days meeting offsite. We spent hours in restaurants and bars together. I invited the other silverback into my home and into my own house. We were trusting each other. But we still failed. We failed not because we did not have enough trust. We failed for a way more basic reason. Curious what that is? So I'm not telling you yet, by the way. We could have gone on with this project. We could have kept riding this wave. We could have kept going at this project for quite a while longer. And I knew when we decided to inform Michael that we would be ending our engagement with this organization, that the engagement with the organization also would most likely end. Of course, we as a team have had a discussion around this before telling Michael to pull the plug. It is almost impossible to continue working for a client once you need to deliver such a message in the end. What was that message? The message was that the investment of almost 100 million euros, more than 25 million euros per year over more than 3 years, will need to be written off. I vividly recall the meeting when I had the CFO and the two senior vice presidents of that organization look at me fully bewildered. They were really absolutely not understanding why I told them that they would not get anything out of this project, that the amount would need to be written off. The partnerships that were in the background of this most likely would also suffer, would be quite problematic or even ended potentially. And yes, some of those ended afterwards. But this is still not the reason why I consider this project to be amongst my biggest failures. You'll come to that. Can you imagine that it took a single slide to convince the CFO and these two SVPs that we had to write this all off? Wondering what that slide is? This is a representation of this slide. This is the single slide that convinced all three that this project would need to end. Yes, there were more topics on this than the single one in the upper right-hand corner. But this was the main reason the project needed to be stopped. It was not that we were not able to provide technology to the customers. It was not that we had conflict in the team. It was not a lack of funding. It was that we were, that we were only able to deliver 10% of throughput to our customers. Customers would have had to pay for a pipe with 100% throughput, an additional fee for the management of this, then only get 10% of what they paid for. It is a difficult value proposition, isn't it? What we were facing here was exactly this issue. The technical team were in love with their solution. We had heard in more than one round how elegant their solution was. Yes, the solution was elegant, but unfortunately, it was off the mark. It did not help our customers, but still not the reason why I consider this to be amongst my largest blunders. The reason why I consider this project to be amongst my largest failures is because I did not initiate very early a simple but important step. I missed it. I overlooked it. I was not on the mark, and my customer had every right to expect that of me. What was the issue? I did not check assumptions. Assumptions and assume. I like those words actually a lot. They allow for very nice wordplays, like assumptions make an ass out of you and me. That's a quote from a CEO at a software company I have worked with. The one on the slide is a quote from a member of that technical team in that project we worked with at that time. And yes, he is right. If you do not check between reality and perception, you will harvest disaster. Why I see this project as one of my largest failures is exactly this point. We did not ask the right questions early enough. We could have saved our client millions. We could have saved relationships. Here's another quote. We all make all sorts of assumptions because we do not have the courage to ask questions. And this is also my biggest learning from this project. If I now experience pushback from stakeholders, I work actively to understand the underlying reasons. I spent several months of training, better understanding approaches and learning over the last 2 years just because of this. But in the end, it all boils down to something simple. All it takes is a little bit of courage. Courage to talk to stakeholders. Courage to question my own bias. Courage to question my own perception. Courage to change my mind. Courage to accept. Yes, Miguel, it is. Courage to accept that we do not have to bring the solution, just the right questions. The question now is how to manage assumptions. Yes, Miguel, you're right. It is the same project that we worked on. So, how do you manage assumptions? Good thing is there's actually a process for that. If we accept that assumptions are a bias for whatever we do, we should properly deal with them, right? Which is what this picture helps you with. Wherever your assumptions are coming from, I suggest that you list them out and define them with your team. And the broader you define them with the team, whatever that team is, your stakeholders ideally as well, the better the list of assumptions will become. This also allows you to now transform your assumptions into hypotheses. Then design an experiment to test them. The easier the experiment is in the beginning, the better. So don't overdo it. Don't create large experiments. Try this as small as you possibly can. It's safer, it's quicker, it's cheaper in the end. This will give you not only a good basis for understanding where you are today, but also an excellent starting point, especially if you rank your assumptions based on how much risk you associate with the assumption and the level of uncertainty you have behind these assumptions. Once this is in place, I also assign to each assumption a category. These categories are either desirability, viability, or feasibility. Desirability is about how much do customers want this. Viability is about, will we be able to earn money with this? Feasibility is about, are we able to build this? And by the way, these are the dimensions that you also find in the business model canvas. And once you have such a list, you will have a good starting point to work on the next topic, your product strategy. Now, there are some people in here that have participated in a training that I'm running on product strategy, so they might recall this picture. But this is my definition of strategy. A product strategy, and that's important. I'm talking about product strategy at the moment, not corporate strategy, because there's not a big, but there's a slight difference here. Of course, it consists of a product vision, the goal you're setting for a product. Now, the difference to the company vision is a product vision is something that should be attainable, something that you really can achieve over time. So it's still a future that you describe, a future that is a couple of years into the future, but it still should be achievable. Then you have your starting point, of course, the position your product is in today, whatever that means. There are many tools and methods to define this, be that SWOT or what other methods you want to use, be that the assumptions that we just discussed, and so on and so forth. And of course, then you also have the steps that get you from your starting point to your target, to your vision. And I like to use the metaphor of a mountain for this, as it nicely allows us to understand these three components. So we want to meet on that summit for whatever reason of this mountain. That is, in the end, our vision, to meet up on the summit of this mountain. You are located wherever you are, your starting point. Now, these 3 peaks are in northern Italy. The question we now need to answer is, how do we get there? Fly from wherever you are to Milano, for example, and then walk, take a helicopter, take public transportation, take a car. These decisions are the tactics and the actions. So depending on our budget, on time constraints and so on, we will decide on our mode of travel and also rule out others, which is why defining what we will not do is so important. And it is part of strategy. You can't do everything for everybody. That's just not feasible. So if you don't define what you're not doing, you're definitely missing out. What I want to discuss with you now is some of those pitfalls, because in the end, that's what I promised with the invite. We'll be discussing some of those challenges that are behind this and how to overcome them. And these are some of the hard-won lessons that I have learned launching more than 100 products, working in product now for almost 30 years. So your product is or will be in what we call a market. And that market consists of customers, of course, and the customer problem that you ideally solve. That might be a real problem, that might be a need, that might be a desire, that might be all of that. Yes, you will have competition, people and companies promising a similar value proposition or a different solution for a customer problem. We'll also have collaborators. These are your suppliers, your partners, your sales channels if they are not part of your own organization. Companies that work with you to provide value to your customers. Lastly, you also, of course, have also regulation. This can be any form of regulation and law, from global to local, from rules and trade definitions specific to your industry to cybersecurity and data protection topics. This is all one complex adaptive system in the end. Hence, you should have a good understanding of how this system interacts and how your company and your products interact with this system. This, in the end, is why we are running customer segmentations, right? Persona development, jobs to be done analysis, and many, many other things that are supposed to help us better understand our customers. This is why we run competitive analysis, value stream mapping to understand the entire value delivery for our customers, and so on. But also just to understand how this beast behaves. An interesting thing is, just like a flock of birds that take their trip south in the fall, it constantly shifts and moves. Small changes on one topic can mean significant changes at the other end, which is, by the way, the easier topic of the systems a product manager works in, because we also have another system that we need to work in. That other one is the company organization that you work in. This is the system where many product managers that I have spoken to are struggling. It is not really a surprise, is it? The reasons for this are so many that it is not possible for me to uncover all of them. What I do want to point out is that no matter what any framework or methodology you apply in your product work, you will have to deal with this system and with the entire system if you want to succeed with your product. Yes, there are people out there that will tell you that you do need not to worry about aspects of this. And they might be right, or specific settings they are seeing. And it might be correct that this is the best for you, but that is something you need to decide and see for yourself and the system you're working in. What is connecting those two systems? It is strategy in the end. In this case, it is both the company strategy and the product strategy. The important part here is that it is not enough to only define strategy, but to constantly talk about the content of that strategy within that system, be that towards customers, and checking in with customers if their perception has changed, if some of the assumptions that you built into hypotheses that are now going to be your bias have shifted for whatever reason. But it's also the same thing internally with your stakeholders, with the different groups of people that you need to work with in that organization. In the end, this is about regularly discussing with all involved about what we are doing. And of course, this is also about discussing how we are doing things. And it's also about why we are doing things in the first place. The goal for senior leadership and product management is to constantly remind on the why. Give all stakeholders clarity on the purpose. This requires that you have the product strategy closely aligned with the corporate strategy. It also requires that any shifts or any changes in strategy, and I mean any component of the strategy, is communicated, including the reason why this change is happening. But why is this a challenge in the first place? Why is it so difficult for us to work in this environment? The interesting question is it you or is it them? Or is there another reason why we are struggling with this situation? Because as soon as we start to understand the other side, we will have the basis to resolve the conflict. Yes, there are a host of potential reasons for conflict. Yes, there are many ways to go at resolving conflict. But if you're not able to step into the shoes of the other person or group of persons, you'll not be able to build trust. And without at least a spark of trust, there is no way to overcome conflict. Now, what is the difference I'm talking about? One of the reasons is simple different roles. Whereas when you are working on a product, you require more entrepreneurial thinking, especially if you are working on new products or younger products or significant change to products. But once the product is introduced and you are scaling, you now most likely need to move to more traditional management. The main difference between the two being that initially you will need to accept and deal with the high uncertainty in the early phases of the product. This is where your assumptions can kick you in places that truly hurt. This is why you want to manage your assumptions closely. But the more mature your product becomes, the less assumptions are going to be there because you have clarified them one way or the other. This is then also why you need to shift this thinking. It also means you will have different forms of working. What are those two different forms of working? Whereas on the entrepreneurial side of things, you accept the unknowns and want to try, fail, learn, and in the end, innovate. On the right-hand side, with traditional management, you're in the space of detailed planning, where failure is to be avoided and where customers are kept at arm's length. This is all about optimization, maximization, and execution. But what is even more important, as this is the reason why we product people struggle with our own organization, is that there are completely different targets and goals behind this. Whereas your VP of operations will have clearly planned on how many customer service representatives or customer success managers you have, how many service calls they expect. This is not only for this month, but most likely for years into the future, as they are flawless at planning. What happens when you come around with a new product and you are disrupting these plans? Plans that were made years ago, plans that pay into personal goals. Don't get me wrong, of course, you might have spoken to the entire firm before. Of course, they all are aware of the product being launched. It still is a surprise. A surprise may be years in the making, but it still just springs up, doesn't it? So let's look a little bit deeper into what drives product success. These are the combinations that I have seen over my lengthy career that are at the basis of most topics. It's team structure, it's leadership, strategy and execution, and technical enablement. What do I mean with each? So the team, the people that I directly work with to deliver the product and the expected business results. These are the people that are jointly with me responsible in various roles that we hold for the success of this product. And yes, the success is dependent on each of these team members and myself. Leadership, the people that are in a position to either help or hinder our success. I have seen people being in full support and also leaders, for example, people on the more customer support side that try to hinder each and every step that we try to take. This led to ways like being directly lied to my face, being, again, bullied, and many other things and many other forms that happen. And yes, that might not be something you want to see. And yes, you would not expect that to happen in a company that has, of course, now psychological safety, but it's still sometimes there. Strategy and execution, this is where the assumptions that we described come in. When you define a strategy, you will build a lot of assumptions. How do you successfully navigate those? How do you decide what to implement? How do you iterate? and change in the complex, uncertain, and turbulent world we act in.
Okay, let's talk afterwards, because I mean, this is a bit of
sorry. So just muted somebody. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat so I can answer those. Now, also it's about technical enablement, and technical enablement being a very broad term here. This is really everything that comes into this. This might be processes, this might be tools, this might be anything else that is needed for the team that is supposed to deliver, for the organization to deliver against the product promise. So whatever is needed to ensure that the implementation of your product happens, that you have the technical capabilities, that you have time to develop those technical capabilities, is there. And if they are not there, then you need to establish them. This can range really from processes to tools and everything in between. So how are you going to implement your generative AI capabilities, for example, if you do not understand how to limit data degradation, how to avoid hallucinations, how to overcome copyright issues, and so on? How do you manage your entire CI/CD chain and automate your testing if you're not looking into what CI/CD systems are out there and what are the best for your use case? Now, if we take this a step further, this is in the end something where you'll have two views on that. So first and foremost, even though this is a linear process, it's a linear depiction, the real process might be anything but. There might be lots of iterations. There might be many, many more iterations than you possibly can see, but depicting them is almost impossible. So, however, these topics are in an order that need to be there for your organization to be able to show strong growth. And it all starts with a clear vision. This vision can only become clear when you have visionary leadership. It's not only your senior management. This is also your product leadership, your product managers, your product owners, your development leads, your testing leads, whoever takes decision, whoever is in a leadership role within your organization needs to have clarity or vision, but they also need to be visionary in leading. It is all about effective communication. And effective communication means that your day is not filled with 1-hour meetings and hundreds of emails each day. It's about being smart, running short meetings, being prepared while allowing time to innovate and be creative. So managing meetings and managing a good meeting culture is extremely important. It doesn't help you if a senior leader tells you that he did not yet have even time to go for lunch. And once you have these in place, you will be able to define a clear strategy. And again, a strategy is not only about defining a vision and your starting point. It is about defining what you will pack in your backpack. And just as important, what you will leave out of it. Which mode of transportation you take and which you will not. Ideally, this strategy is derived with the team. The team you work with should be aligned. A real team should be in place. What I mean with a real team, ideally, this is a group of people that have trust in each other, that are able to resolve and mitigate conflicts. If conflicts are not resolved, you will continue to have poor team dynamics, which leads to a quick degradation. A real team will have clarity on their goals in the form of what they are trying to achieve. Like the scoreboard in any game during the running European Championships, like tonight with Germany playing. Everybody's aware where the team is in this game because they have that scoreboard up there. So it's not only for the audience out there to see what the current goal ratio is and who's in the lead. It is also for the teams. They need to know because they need to play to win. But for that, they need to always know where they are at that specific moment, because that will potentially change their tactics for winning that game. This also means that in the end, the entire team is aware of the KPIs and that they're trying to achieve. And guess what? If they now also have the right tools to do their job, get access to or get the time to learn about new technologies, you will start to see continuous improvement. They will be biased based in data as the team itself will start optimizing, which leads to faster and better decisions, which will lead to growth. And all of this starts with spending effort on clarity of what we all want to achieve and why. Or to phrase it differently, garbage in equals garbage out. Now, that sounds all pretty simple, right? But of course it is not. Why is it so hard? It is so hard because We all are emotional and social beings. We are in complex adaptive systems. We might have issues and feelings towards others. The question is, where do they reside? Is it just me? Then I might be the only one that needs to change. Is it the team? Have they not yet built trust, for example? Or is it them as in the organization? This might be a leadership issue. It might be a lack of transparency or many other different topics. Now, the really interesting thing comes in if you look at those overlaps. For example, the one in the middle. What if the organization, the team, and I have issues? So if it is really all three of them, that means there's obviously a lack of understanding, a lack of goals, a lack of purpose. There's a simple question that needs to be put out there and discussed at this point. Why are we doing whatever we are doing? And the other topics are just as important and need to be addressed. And if you want to see success, I will now show you my go-to method to get there. Now, I'm certain some of you have seen that. Some of you, I've had discussions about this already. I expect some of you might be fully aware of this tool. This tool is called Triple Loop Learning. And when I first used this tool, I was not aware of the underlying principle. I wasn't aware of the tool, to be precise. But this method has helped me significantly over the years. It has allowed me to get change voluntarily by large parts of the organization. The first loop is what we all know as build, measure, learn. That first loop answers the question of what. What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? What value is our customer getting out of our product? The second loop is looking at our assumptions. And yes, that's the reason why we had that discussion before. How are we doing what we are doing? How are we achieving what we are trying to achieve? How is our customer getting value from our product? The third loop is about why and looking at context and hence purpose. Why are we working the way we are working? Why are the goals we have set ourselves relevant? Why is this the best value for our customer? And by the way, this question of why is also the key for achieving product market fit. If you are not able to answer the why for your main customer, not the early adopters, early majority, if you are not able to answer that question for them, they will just not buy your product. And yes, there can be many, many different other forms of questions than what I just brought to you with what I just said. To give an example, for a product that I launched a couple of years ago, we had issues with the product delivery process. We were struggling with the order to cash steps, to be more precise. I invited members of each of the departments that we were working with in that process for a process run through. So what we did was we actually did a paper exercise. So we did not use any computers. We just went through the process, starting with sales and asking them what they would be delivering. And of course, that is a signed purchase order of a customer. And they had an example with them. And we then used that example of that purchase order and moved this along each step in the process. So the sales purchase order was handed to inside sales. And inside sales now looked at that purchase order and stated what they were missing. And then we moved to the next steps once all of those things were clarified. So we learned very quickly on the issues that we were facing with that simple purchase order and what additional information the others needed that was not on there. And just by doing so, we were already able to clarify a lot of underlying problems. And we iterated this until we had everybody happy, which already meant a significant change to documents that were passed around. Something that I actually, for example, had now to go back to the head of sales and tell him that we need to change some of those documents and that I needed him to sign off on certain things around this, including, for example, that salespeople were now no longer allowed to put their own specific customer requirements with regards to, for example, payment terms, other things in there, because if they did that, then we would have to go back a couple of times. Very often these were handwritten, nobody was able to read them, nobody understood them, customers were not happy, and so on and so forth. Now, after we iterated that a couple of times, I started to ask the question, so why are we doing this way? How can we streamline this process? How can we make that simpler? What can we do to simplify this and get orders handled quicker? And based on these questions, the team themselves started to suggest changes. They went all the way to asking if the inside sales team could be located in the same office as the customer support people for the respective customers. The interesting thing was, sell this co-location to their management was harder than them in the end really moving together. This product in the end won a prize for best customer experience. And all of that just because I started to ask questions like what, how, and why. Now, something to bear in mind for all of us is just because we have understood that something is wrong does not necessarily mean that the team and people in the broader organization already understand this. This is also the reason why when you launch a new product, it comes as a surprise to the rest of the organization. Because they are aware, of course, but they don't, for them, it doesn't really matter. It's not important for them. That's why it's not on their radar. The metaphor I like to use for this is a world-class marathon, like, for example, the New York City Marathon or something similar. Marathon where world-class athletes compete with ordinary runners. What happens there is that these world-class athletes most likely have already finished their marathon, and some might already have won a world record or whatever, before most of the ordinary runners are even aware that the marathon really started. This is what often happens in organizations. Individuals, especially more entrepreneurial-minded people, will jump on the bandwagon of change, of new product, because they are interested in that. They are keen on learning new things. They want to innovate. Whereas many others, especially people that are more traditional minded, have not even seen that the times are changing. One important driver for your product, but also for change, as well as resistance to change, are emotions. Our emotions, our customers' emotions, our colleagues' emotions. Be aware that neuroscience has proven that we will have made a decision based on any of these emotions, and now then only trying to justify the decision with rational thought. If you bear that in mind, it allows you to shift to the importance of empathy mapping, jobs to be done, and similar tools that help you to map those towards your product and how it is perceived, but also to other things. So it's not only allows you to understand what you should need with regards to your value proposition for your product, but also for your target audience or ideal customer profile and the different members of a buying center at a B2B customer. This also can be used internally to your stakeholders. So what stops you from using a value proposition, a empathy map or whatever on the people, the organization where you actually expect them to be pushing against that product being launched, pushing against the change that you want? So no one will stop you typically if you want to run an internal experiment regarding a product's internal value proposition by your main stakeholders. The only thing that's typically stopping you is reaching out to people and asking. And as long as you are open to feedback, as long as you are able to actively listen and realize if the expected emotion based on the value proposition you just explained is there, you have an opportunity to learn. You have the opportunity to understand your colleagues better and thereby create better products for your customers. And all it takes is a little bit of courage. So should you be interested in learning a little bit more about product management and product strategies and how to implement these, I'm offering several product masterclasses as well as product management courses that is certified by IC Agile, a leading Agile body. That class currently has an trainer NPS of 92. I'm pretty happy about that. Still trying to improve, by the way. The product masterclasses are all coaching based and will require participants to have a background in product management already. They will not be traditional courses where I'll be doing the teaching. The participants are expected to train the others. For this, we'll be running weekly team and individual coaching sessions at approximately 6 to 8 hours of training and 6 to 8 hours of individual coaching and 4 hours of team coaching per masterclass. Now, I promised you a gift. And that gift is, if you're interested, please scan the QR code and send me a note on what you're interested in. It's already, some of the text is already in there. What I'll be providing you is a document with example questions of each of the points in the graph for the 3 different areas, me, team, and of course, also the organization. And yes, I will send out the recording and the slides to all of you tomorrow morning. That concludes my presentation. and I'm looking forward to getting questions, if there are any. Was I too fast for you guys? Did I lose you somewhere? Okay.
No, it was not too fast. Just need time to write a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, Miguel, to your question, can I share a bit more details on the contents of each of the courses? Yes, I can. I decided not to put it in here, by the way, because I didn't want to bore you with all of those details. I'm more than happy to share that. I have a document on that, of course, that explains the different contents of those courses. In the end, the master classes are all meant to provide you a pretty round picture with regards to product management, but it's really meant more for senior product management or product management leaders. This is not meant as somebody that is entering this space. Basic idea here is to really give you the tools that you need to succeed, be able to launch products really a lot better than what I often see. Build better products in the end is the basic idea behind this. That's one thing. The other one, the PDM course, that's a pretty straightforward course. It actually lacks a couple of things. That's the reason why I created those master classes. From my perspective, it's something that IC Agile defines and what we need to provide. But still, I think a worthwhile course. Again, the NPS behind that is positive enough. And I also have a couple of people in here that participated in this course already, like Diane and Daria. I think that's it right now. The people that have participated. And at least I know from Diane, because she provided me sufficient feedback, well, also Daria provided sufficient feedback, that this course must have been pretty good for them. Are there any questions with regards to the content that I just provided?
Yeah, Norbert, I was thinking about something.
Sure.
So there was this graph where in the beginning a more entrepreneurial approach is needed in the beginning, whereas and companies tend to move to a more traditional once the product is confirmed and is in the market and has the its clients, and you have good KPIs. Exactly, the other one before that. Exactly. So the idea is that my question is like, is this something that causes some products to fail after a while? Should we have entrepreneurial management all the time, or should it be maybe sometimes like I don't know, a mix sometimes? And I'm asking this as an agile coach who's all in for continuous trial and errors and failing fast and doing that.
So thanks for the question. The topic is what is here in the middle called scaling. So what happens is you introduce your product and you have high uncertainty. You're still trying to optimize it. So when you create whatever you create, that might be a first version, something we might call MVP or whatever the organization does. And you don't yet have product market fit. You start to work towards product market fit and you continue to improve the product over time. Still, you are in a phase of high uncertainty. Now, all of a sudden, you have achieved product market fit. And that can really happen overnight. For some companies, that happens extremely quickly. Just look at, for example, what happened to ChatGPT. The iPhone is another good example. Yes, all of those are good examples for this. So all of a sudden, you need to scale. What happens if you're not prepared to scale? What happens if you're not able to add additional service for your ChatGPT product? What happens if you're not able to deliver more iPhones? Somebody else will step in. And this is why the scaling is important on the one hand side. But on the other hand, all of a sudden, you don't want somebody that is creative, extremely creative. You want all of a sudden somebody that is able to just deliver against this. So that really is a mind shift that needs to change here. And one of the issues one of the things I typically try to bring across in my trainings is, as a product manager, you should be aware of where you are yourself. What are you really good at? So I myself, I'm a very creative person. I am not a person that is well suited for traditional management roles. Well, that also means that I typically work with products that need to be launched that are not there yet, or then might need to be relaunched, that might need to, let's say, be repositioned. I'm not good, for example, also at the very early phases. I'm not good at defining product for a startup or in the startup environment. That's not something I feel comfortable with. But that's something you need to ask yourself, where are those people that you're working in and with? And there needs to be some form of handover. That's something that needs to be actively changed.
So basically, it's a shift from problem discovering or the product design to more. I wouldn't call it like that, but I don't have a better word. It's like mass production of that and ensuring that you have the means to produce according to the demand and also be able to shift when there are things. So it kind of reminds me of lean, the lean production system.
Yeah, of course. Because and yes, there is some components of this in there. Don't get me wrong, it is. But again, the issue is if you have somebody that is really very entrepreneurial, they fully buy into their product. They believe it is their product, it's their baby. And handing that over to somebody else is not easy. On the other hand, again, as I said before, I had cases where the VP of operations really pushed extremely hard against me because he didn't want that new product to be launched, because he stated, I don't have the manpower for that, which is understandable. He didn't have the manpower, but the mandate was different. My mandate was different to his. So you have a conflict there. And that's something, as soon as you are aware that this might be the case, you can manage that, of course. So did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great, sure. Then Daniel, to your question, you find regulatory topic to be the most challenging one. Telecom, okay. That means you will have a host of different regulations that you need to, of course, work in. GDPR being one of the more fun ones, depending on what type of telecom. You might also have to look into specific, for example, German regulation, TKG, telecommunications law in Germany. You will have things like NIS2. You will have things like also the European Cyber Resilience Act coming your way in the not too far future. And NIS2, by the way, being the next one that needs to be something that you need to work through. Yes, there are tips how to improve this awareness, especially. You will have to have one way or the other somebody like data protection in there, data protection officer. You will have to have somebody that is managing risk within the organization. And these are the people that you will need to engage with this. And jointly, if that is something you really believe that needs to do, is you need to define a communication strategy. So if you look at NIS2, for example, one of the things I have done at a smaller telco not too long ago was I actually used the basis of NIS2 for two things. On the one hand side, I created a document explaining why, even though it is a cyber resilience topic, it actually still generates business value. And I explained that business value. And I have a document for that. If you want that, just ping me. On the other hand, it is also something where you need to communicate to the broader audience why this is important. And one of those is your C-level. Because if you look at NIS2, for example, or if you look at the German TKG, the fines behind that are pretty nasty. So for NIS2, for example, it's up to 2.5% of the entire concern, so the entire organization, not only the company that you work in, also any form of mother organization that's above that. That's one thing, so 2.5% of revenue. But also, if you are C-level and you're not looking into this, you might be facing issues like the body, in this case, the BSI in Germany, for example, forcing you to step out until those issues are resolved. And you're also personally liable with no way of pushing that liability to somebody else. So you can't even hand that over to an insurance. You are personally liable as a C-suite executive for any damages. That also means that the organization, if something like this happens, has to, in the end, enforce that and make you personally liable. Who, in their right mind, on the C-level, is going to be willing to do that? They just need to be made aware, typically. So it's a question of how to package that to them, that they understand that they have an issue personally. And then typically many other things follow. Sure, Jan. Take care. Are there any further questions, guys? If there are not, then thanks everybody. Take care.
Dankeschön.
Thank you
Hope
too,
to see you
Norbert.
soon. Bye bye.
Danke.
So.
Vielen Dank. Schönen Abend.
Ebenso.
Vielen
Thank
Dank.
you. Bye.